Hello, everyone. I want to take some time now to kind of talk about some new controls that we're going to start using in our program that are going to help, with gathering data from our users. Okay. Up to this point, as you should know, we have now introduced really just three controls to our GUI. Again, our GUI is this right here, Graphical User Interface, correct? GUI is what that stands for. And so far, we have talked about instructional labels, correct? Which means they won't be referenced in code, and all they really do is instruct a user on really what it is the thing next to it is all about. The text box, and the text box is for free form input, and that's pretty much what we've been using at this up to this point. And you guys have used text boxes many, many times, and all the applications you actually have used. And so it's for free formed input. And then our output should always be in a label. If we display our output, it should be in a label, mainly because we don't want the user to change it. So don't put it in a text box. Make sure it's always in a label, okay? And if you do that, you don't have to worry about the user changing it because they can't. Finally, we have dealt with the button, which for the most part is always going to be something that the user will interact with. That's that event we talk about, correct? That it's going to be basically and what the user already knows. Again, the user is a person using our application is going to click once they provide the input and the output. Okay, so that's where we are up to this point, and hopefully you feel comfortable with those three different controls, of which the label we use for two purposes. One, for instructional purposes on our form, and one that lists our output. Once again, make sure we only name our output label, okay, not our instructional labels. I do not recommend you naming your instructional labels. Some teachers or some instructors and some places of business might state that you should. That's fine if they do. I'm not going to contradict them. I personally think you shouldn't because I think it could get confusing when you actually deal with what label you're looking at when you get into code. So I recommend only name the labels you're going to reference from code, not your instructional labels. Keep them label 1, label 2, or whatever they are. And it's no big deal, once again, because you'll never change them. If for some reason you're writing an application where your instructional label could potentially change, and I've seen that happen, then you would name it. Again, if you're going to reference it from code, name it. Okay? Anyway, what this video is all about then is talking about a couple other different controls that we'll talk that we want to be able to add to easily collect more data. Again, our goal when we have a GUI like this is to use the controls that are available to us to make it as easy as possible for our users to enter the data necessary, and doing so without the possibility of making a mistake. In some cases, they could always make a mistake. If we ask for free-form data from a text box, they could misspell something. What we want to do is minimize that as much as possible. Okay, sometimes we're not going to be able to 100% or even 80%, but sometimes we can, and that's when we can utilize other controls to help us do that. In this particular case, what we want to talk about is the checkboxes, okay, and the radio buttons. And you'll probably figure out, based upon the order in which you're listening to all these videos, how you could apply based upon our example. So a checkbox is simply this. It's one that you sit back and you bring on, and you see I'm just dragging it on there, checkbox 1, checkbox 2, and go from there. And what a checkbox tells people, you could probably tell me better than anybody, that you check it if you want it. It's all that apply. You could check all three boxes in this case, or if I put a fourth one there, all four, or I could check one, none, or two, or three, right? And so in this case, you're telling the user, check these boxes if they're relevant to you, if you want, and so on. So it's all that apply. So that's a nice way of doing it. This way they don't have to spell out certain things. They can just check it if they want it. How you go about doing this is you come over to the properties. The naming of a checkbox is CHK is a Hungarian notation. And then whatever the checkbox is for, we'll just say, I don't know. What the heck? Let's go ahead and use our example here, and we'll say this is going to be for a sound system. Okay, so let's call it sound. All right. All right, something like this. This one will be called, oops, let me go over here and I'll pin this so we can see it. This one will be called CHK sound, and this will be leather, right? And then finally CHK, and this would be navigation. Okay, always spell out everything. Try to avoid abbreviations and one letter things. Spell it out so people know exactly what you're doing. You know what you're doing, and the person picking up your program next would know what you're doing. Okay, use good naming. It only took me about 1 second to type that out, but it could take somebody 10 minutes or 15 minutes to figure out what you're even trying to say. I've seen a couple of those already. Okay. So with that said, we come down here, and what you can do is you go to the text property, and this is what holds what's to the right of it. Okay. And so I would put on here navigation. If I could spell it, navigation. I think I can spell it, but I can't type it. And then this one here could be leather, Leather. Once again, I can spell it, but I type it, and then this would be a sound system, right? And there you go. And you see how that actually works. Pretty slick, right? Okay. In our future video for this week, I'll show you how to apply this and actually in the code, okay? And you'll kind of learn how to put it together. But what this is for is a simple way of gathering data when basically if collecting stuff that you can actually choose from. In this case, it's all that apply. Make sense? The other one that we can do that we'll talk about is the radio buttons. You've probably seen a radio button before, okay? And here you go, right here. Radio buttons are pretty unique and also a very powerful control in Visual Studio. And I'll show you why. I'll actually start this and you'll see why. Our radio buttons is basically says pick one, correct? Pick one. Don't pick all that apply. Pick one is when you use a radio button. Once again, based upon you using applications everyday life, you probably know that. And so this is pick one. You see how easy it is to put it on your form. How you name these is RAD is the Hungarian notation. So RAD and whatever the button's for. So let's see, I think I had 3 here, right? And so we had standard. We'll go ahead and do that, standard. And then this is RAD. Let's see, we had standard, we had pluralized, AR. Once again, typing's fun. And then we need one more. So I'll go over here and drag one more over. Try to keep everything nice and lined up. And finally, RAD, whoops, get rid of that, RAD custom, correct? And the same thing kind of applies in regards to the text property. So the text property is what's going to show up on the right. So this would be custom. I'll go backwards now. Custom, and then pluralized, and then finally standard. Pretty slick, right? And if I actually started this, I don't have any code behind this at all, but you can kind of see how this actually works. Okay. And so in this case here, it's just the GUI. So once again, I can check this very easily. What I'll be able to do is read which ones are actually checked in code. And again, I'll show you how we do that when we get a little bit later in our videos for this week and applying this to our particular problem, our sample problem that we're going through. When it comes to radio buttons, well, look what's interesting here. I can only pick one. So this is a pretty powerful thing. I didn't have to program anything. It's only going to ensure that I pick one. Isn't that neat? And once again, we'll be able to check that in our code once we get to that. Okay? So this one's all that apply. I can turn them all off, turn one on, whatever. They're mutually exclusive of each other, but these are exclusive of each other, basically saying that, inclusive of each other, I should say, that only one can be picked. Pretty slick? Here's one more piece that we want to talk about before we end this video, though, is that, well, wonder if I have 2 of these. Wonder if I also want to collect, let's see, let's do something else here. And maybe we're going to collect a discount thing here. Maybe you get a discount if you're a senior citizen, okay? And so we would sit back and say, maybe in this case here, senior citizen or senior, we don't want to say senior citizen sounds old, but senior, and maybe, if you're over 65, right? And maybe I'll put that out there, 65 plus, just for sake of a stupid example. So if you're over that, you're going to get something, you'll get a discount. If you're not senior, okay, do this, okay? And so we got to pick one of the two, right? So either you're not a senior or you are a senior. And if you are, you're going to get a discount. We'll say we threw that in there after we did our program, okay? And so we have two sets of radio buttons. Let's go ahead and play with these a little bit. And you will see that, okay, I have this here. I can still play around with my checkboxes very easily. And I'm pluralized, and I come over and I say, oh, I am a senior. I'm not yet. I'm getting close, but I'm not yet. But look what happened. My pluralized goes away, and I can sit back, and my users can do this all day and get very frustrated. Okay? So there is a reason, right, that this actually does this. And the reason is simply this, that radio buttons work in groups, okay? The highest level group that we know of is the form itself. So it's looking at all these radio buttons, and they hit things because we all have them on the form and the entire form, that they're all grouped together, and meaning that you can only pick one from this grouping. If you want to subgroup them, for lack of a better term, you can do that by using the group box. Remember the thing we kind of introduced before. And so to do the group box, you would very easily go to containers and put a group box on here, okay? And probably what I would do is something like this, and I can copy these and I'll move them right to my group box. I'll take my group box and move them a little bit up here. I recommend that all, and so I probably do something like this, senior, something like this, and maybe what I would do here is say yes or no, right? And make it something like this. I would recommend that all your radio buttons always be in a group box, okay? And so in this case here, this is how you can do this, okay? Now, so same thing here. I would do a group box for my finish, okay, just like this. And I would take these and stick them in there. What's kind of cool about it, once you put them in a group box, now they're part of that group and I can just move them around that easily. I'll name my group box finish in this case, okay? All right, and there you go. Isn't that slick? Now watch this. And you'll see that I can still do my check boxes. Everything's fine there. I'm a senior and I want pluralize. And you notice it didn't go off because now these are two separate groups of radio buttons. Pretty slick? Okay, I think so too. All right, so get used to, if you haven't done so yet, get used to group boxes. You don't need to name the group box. You can keep it as whatever the default was, but make sure you put up on top of the group box what it's for. Don't have it say group box 1 or group box 2. The user doesn't know what that means. I don't know what that means. Tell me what it's for. Senior, yes or no. Finish, pick one, right? There you go. It doesn't take long, and it makes everything look that much easier. All right? One final thing. I may have said that before, but if I did, I'm sorry. We got one final thing. So in this case here, what we can sit back and say is that we want our users to pick one of these radio buttons. When it comes to checkboxes, we don't care if they pick them or not, because either you pick them or you don't pick them, right? It's really up to you. If you want those options, check it. If you don't want them, that's fine, okay? But when it comes to these finishes and the seniors, you got to give me an answer. What we don't want to do is have to write code that's going to validate, which we're going to do here in the future, and say, you haven't picked one yet, pick one. What we can do is make this a little bit easier for us and actually pick defaults in design time. What do I mean by that? So in this case here, what I could do is come over to my standard and come to the property called checked. See it right there? And make this true. And maybe senior, more than likely I'll go to my no, because not everybody's a senior yet. And I can go to checked once again. And again, we're doing this at design time, right? So this holds it permanently, right? And make that true. And then if I do that, I can now go ahead and you'll see how much easier this is. So in a way, I'm telling my user, if you just want standard, which is probably what the most people want, you don't have to do anything. If you aren't a senior citizen, you don't have to do anything. But if you do want custom, pick it. And if you are a senior citizen, pick it. This way, it's already kind of picked for you before you even get started. And so what we're doing is setting a default in that case, okay? What's kind of cool is that if you sit back and say, you know what, I'm going to try to trick it, and I'm going to set two things as a default. And if I go up here and set this one as a default too, both standard and parallelized in the same group, watch what happens. Standards goes off. Very powerful control. Okay? Anyway, so that's your quick introduction to radio buttons and checkboxes. More than likely, you can see how you can apply these. They're very slick based upon what you're doing and what your application's asking for. Will you have them on every form? The answer is no, you won't. But based upon what you're doing and how your input is and how you want to collect your input, it's another control to consider. Okay. And so as you learn more and more about different controls, each time you design your GUI, you should consider what's the best control to gather data to minimize the possibility of mistakes. And boy, these two right here really do that based upon the situation and the problem being asked. Okay?